Let's take a closer look at our stock and flow technique that we're using to conceptualize our system, because there's often some confusion over how we use stocks when we have a plural name in them versus how we use it in the singular. That's really an engineering distinction that I want to make as I go through it. So I want to use a couple of very mundane stocks from our shopping mall system example that we're dealing with. So let's start by looking at the stock and flow when it's in the plural. So I might have waste bins throughout my mall, dozens, if not hundreds of them, as I go through. And I'm dealing with a stock in the mall of waste bins in the plural, and I emphasize the plural there. Okay, I'm talking about the waste bins themselves. Under what condition would I get a new bin? And under what conditions would I get rid of a bin or retire it? Maybe it's rusty, maybe it's dirty, maybe it's damaged. But under what condition would I not use that bin anymore? So at any given time, the mall is a stock of waste bins that have been acquired for that purpose as I go through. And that's the way I want to read it when I use that plural term. Likewise, out behind the mall, I've got a collection of dumpsters into which the housekeeping people are putting our stuff. So we have new dumpsters that come along, and we have retired dumpsters. They get damaged or too dirty or too rusty or whatever, but dumpsters come and go. So at any given time, as a snapshot, the mall has a number of waste bins and a number of dumpsters. So when I use the plural form of it, what I'm expecting is that the thing flowing through the stock is cases of or instances of the things named in the stock. Now that's very different than if I use the singular. So suppose I say, what is a waste bin in the singular? In the waste bin in the singular, the thing going into the waste bin largely is trash. Okay, discarded trash. Okay, and what comes out is collected trash. So in between someone discarding something in the bin and me and someone from housekeeping taking it out of the bin, it's in the bin. So at any given time, a waste bin is a stock of trash. And I can view it that way as I go through. Okay, I could also do the same thing with the dumpster. Okay, so it has consolidated trash and actually hauled trash. Okay. So any given dumpster at any given time can be empty, or it could be full or overflowing potentially. I might be very concerned to know the capacity of a dumpster. I might even want to know the capacity of a waste bin. I might want to know the type of a waste bin if I draw distinctions between trash and recyclable, for instance. So I have a plural sense of the facility, and I've got a singular sense of the facility. And what I would point out to you is you need both. We tend, when we're designing systems, to focus on the singulars. We're always focused on the value add and the transactional side of any system. So, how do the waste bins get emptied, things of that nature. So I might be writing a procedure to, perhaps empty the bins. So I'm writing perhaps a housekeeping procedure, among many other things that would have housekeeping do. But if I want to work in a structured way, really, if I say go and for each waste bin in waste bins, okay, what I want to do is empty the bin into the work cart. So housekeeping is rolling around the building with a cart, and presumably I've got a stock and flow where I'm talking about those as well. And that's my for each loop. I don't immediately for every bin go out to the dumpster and dump it. I let the for each loop expire, and at that point I empty the cart into a dumpster in dumpsters. Okay. Now, if it seems redundant to name the bins twice in the singular and the plural, yes, it is. You could leave that off if you wanted. But the reality is, in the syntax of stock and flow diagrams, there's actually no requirement that I name the stocks this way. So I didn't have to call dumpsters dumpsters and dumpster singular dumpster. I do that because by using a naming convention that you always follow consistently, people will be able to interpret what you're creating. So in fact, from this procedure, I know that I can go find the cart stock and flow and talk about the capacity of that. So if someone's rolling around the building with one style of cart, I know its capacity. There's a limit to how many bins that person can empty before they would have to take it out to the dumpster. So I might only have them empty the bins in the waste bins in one of the wings. Okay, because the carts they're using aren't large enough to go through the entire mall, so I segment that and do it for every wing. So maybe I have a for loop around that for each wing. Okay, I have to be able to do the emptying. So I'm developing my procedures because every arrow of every stock and flow is in fact a procedure. So I can talk about the procedures on the singular quite nicely because I don't really need a procedure for my customer to throw away trash. But that's a misnomer if I think of it that way. There is a procedure. I can't force my customers to do it a particular way, but I can influence how they do it by, for instance, marking the bins. If I label the bins trash and recycling, then the way my customers will throw things out are more likely to comply with my design. So when you're dealing with an external agent like a customer, you don't have complete control over them. You have some control through the signage that you give them to indicate what you want them to do. And then internally within our control, collecting the trash and consolidating it into the dumpster, this combination of steps right here, two different sub-functions get consolidated into the one broader function to go around as housekeeping and empty the bins. Likewise, I don't necessarily need a detailed procedure for a haulage because waste management company is actually doing that. But how I place the bins, how I put signage in, how I arrange those bins relative to the parking lots will have a lot to do with how easy or difficult that procedure is. But every arrow and every stock and flow has to be covered by your work system design in the system you're putting together. Someone has to do that thing or it's not going to happen. So I would stress, look at the two sides of the diagram. Because the reality is nobody's going to be able to collect and take out the trash if my mall doesn't have waste bins and dumpsters. So it's only possible to do the operational side of my system because I've implemented the procedures on this left side and I've built the facility. So where do waste bins come from? And when do I buy new ones? Where do dumpsters come from? When do I buy new ones? Where do I buy the carts that my housekeeping staff uses? My facilities have to exist. Nothing happens on the transaction side until my system takes care of it on the operations side. So getting those operational layers designed, building the wings, building the stores, leasing the stores, all that stuff has to happen. And that's the stuff we tend to miss as industrial engineers. We're so quick to jump into the transactional part of the system that we forget that the system itself has to exist. Recall an ATM example system where we talk a lot about taking cash, getting cash out of an ATM. We tend to talk less about who puts the cash in the machine. How do we get cash out of an ATM if someone isn't putting cash in the machine? So there's always an operational facility side that has to be dealt with, even though our intent and our scope is really to talk a lot about the operational side of making the mall work. So if you want a mall to work, you ultimately want shoppers to come in and buy things in stores. But most of the diagram that is the scope of a mall actually has nothing to do with the shopping. It has to do with making sure everything else is available and that I keep my facilities clean and operating. And if I create that infrastructure layer, that's the foundation, that's the bedrock on which this entire operational system gets designed. So plural stocks are about facilities and making sure they're there. Singular stocks are about the operations of your work system into the design to make it work, and all of it has to happen. So ultimately, not only is there a procedure for emptying the bins, there's a procedure for buying the bins and deciding where to put them. is a procedure for buying this dumpster and deciding how it gets placed. So even these arrows on the operational side have to be implemented as procedures. And by the time you're done with a large complex system, you'll find you have usually more procedures on the facility side than you actually have on the transactional side. But it's the combination of the two that makes for a complete system.